is a deck that has been doing reasonably well here. And I think Corey Baumeister's been streaming it a lot, and we've seen how the One Ring has impacted that deck. What are your thoughts on the One Ring potentially in this deck, and are there any other updates that we've seen to this archetype with the printing of Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, so there's been some, small changes to the deck here. Basically, we worked in the One Ring. That's going to do the thing that the One Ring does to draw a lot of cards, but it also presents another mini combo against certain decks on ROG, as you can sacrifice the ring to Grinding Station, recast it with Emery, regain the Protection Clause, and against a deck like Hammer, for example, they just don't have any real answer to it outside of maybe a Spell Pierce or a Mana Tithe, which is a pretty easy card to play around. So that's going to add a lot to the deck. We've also seen players sort of move in different directions with, the things they have to cut to make room for the ring. And it looks like this week, Mullaly has decided to get rid of, Ledger Shredder, which is a card that sort of played a mid-range game plan, but instead of having the ring do that. But big picture-wise, this is the same Grinding Breach deck that we have seen dominate the NRG series last year in the hand of Jesse Robkin. But this week, it is sort of just a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more in on combos than it is a mid-range deck.
Understood. Looks like Connor's going to be going down to 6 here. On the other side of the table, we have Benji Solomon playing Temur Rhinos. Now, this is going to be an interesting matchup. We see two. So Mishra's Bauble and Mox Amber come into play here on turn 1. How do you feel about this from the Rhino side?
On the Rhino side, this matchup can be a little interesting. It's kind of favored you because the Rhino deck is sort of an aggressive tempo deck where its job is to get something in play and then stop like one thing from hitting the battlefield and sort of hope that goes the distance. In this deck, you have a lot of pieces that are nice, but if you stop the breach, it's often enough with 2 4/4s in play to sort of close the door very quickly. So that's something that Connor is going to be staying aware of. And so you're not super unhappy to see this. If a card like Emery had been followed up by that double artifact start, and it looks like Connor does have an Emery in hand, is going to shortcut some fetches here, then that would have been really strong as we would have started having, 2-3 cards drawn to turn off the baubles. But instead, it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a delayed Emery.
Okay, interesting here. Yeah, that's one thing that I also wanted to check in on with you, which is we see cards like the One Ring splashing into Jeskai Breach. Is there anything from the new set that particularly excites you in the Rhinos deck?
Not too much. I've seen some players actually put the ring in small copies in the Rhinos deck. Seems fine. All in all, though, I think the Breach deck just got a nice upgrade here. And we do need to mill cards off that Emery. Maybe we can get those players that, I guess that's a trigger you can miss. So it might be a situation where Connor's missed it. But basically, there's not too much that the Breach deck got. And that is, a small thing, but it did get the ring on ROG. So, did you need a lot more if your deck got the ring?
That's a really good point too, right? Because I think we mentioned this earlier, how the ring is. I personally think it's one of those format warping cards, and I'm pretty excited to see how Pro Tour Barcelona coming up in a few weeks is going to really be impacted by this. As we see, looks like Mystical Dispute is going to go ahead and counter the Emery, so that's why the trigger hadn't actually resolved yet. They're still on the stack here. We see Steam Vents, Sacred Foundry, Mox Amber. Benji is going to go ahead and play a Steam Vents untapped, fetching on what appears to be Connor's upkeep. This can only scream one thing, right?
Yeah, it's a little fire ice situation. Let's tap down some mana, draw a couple cards.
All right, we're going to go ahead and tap that Steam Vents with ice, draw a card there. Now, the critical turn is a concept that's really interesting in matches of Magic. Really just boils down to when you need to be braced for your opponent to be doing just whatever their deck is trying to do. What do you think is the critical turn here for the Temur Rhinos deck?
I think it's turn 3 on ROG. Thank you for the layup on that one. I think the Cascaders are...
Was it too obvious? I think it was too obvious, right?
It was good. I love it. It made me look smart. As we do see a land drawn here, both players sort of stuck there. Connor picked up the Urza Saga. By the way, I don't know if we mentioned this on ROG. The team of Connor and Theo actually won our last team event in St. Louis. Their third player, Twinless Twin, couldn't make it out this weekend, so they picked up Shad Harney, a legacy player from Alabama, instead. But, these are sort of our reigning champs.
Oh, okay. All right. That's interesting, because you also told me one fun fact, which is that the NRG series modern events are frequently won by Temur Rhinos. So we have the winning archetype versus the literal winning player. So now we know whether it's going to be the player or the game kind of deal, which is a little nice dynamic.
Yes, every modern NRG so far this year has been won by Temur Rhinos. So that is a little bit of a fun fact there. If we had a little trivia board that would pop up. So we're going to see a Ragavan cast for the turn.
Yep, Ragavan in play now. We did see earlier Crashing Footfalls get suspended. It's at 3 counters now. And unfortunately, Benji just doesn't have that extra land drop to get to that critical turn 3 segment here. Stomp is going to go ahead and target Ragavan, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
in
it looks like we're gonna
response...
make it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're seeing Stomp come back in the deck. People like Oliver Tomiko very loud on Twitter about 5 months ago. I know you did a grudge match between him and Jesse Robkin. We were saying, the reason Team Rhinos wasn't doing well is because players were playing awful cards like Bone Crusher Giant in the past, and they need to play things like Mystical Dispute. That's actually changed now with the One Ring. Bone Crusher Giant's little flavor text of damage cannot be prevented actually comes up in a big way. So you end up stomping yourself a lot. That way your Rhinos can deal damage through the One Ring and push across that last little bit of point damage.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, because if damage can't be prevented, this reminds me back of when True Name Nemesis was really big in Legacy, and people would play Wild Slash to kill a True Name that was blocking one of your creatures. That's hot tech. I actually really like that. Magic is so sweet sometimes.
Yeah, Magic is really, really dope. As we're going to see Connor respond to this Urza Saga activation for our Player of the Year last year.
And I really like this too, how Connor has not yet moved to the main phase yet, is thinking the turn out before making motions. One thing that I really like about this is a habit that a lot of players, like I personally am I just don't do it enough. But I admire watching Reed Duke at Pro Tour Philly, the Pro Tour that he won, because Reed would just pause at just like random times, and by doing that, he would think about his plays for the whole turn, and then significantly decrease the amount of information he was telegraphing. For example, earlier in the match, we saw Benji knock on the table here before drawing the card on turn 3, which is a pretty clear signal that he doesn't have that third land. He's trying to get lucky, right? Those are the kind of small things that I think actually add up throughout the course of a tournament to, like masquerade bits and pieces of information here. Anyways, that aside, Construct is now in play here for Connor Mullaly.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're seeing Benji. It looks like he missed on the land again. I have to imagine he would have slammed the land.
The good news, though, is that the Rhinos, the Crashing Footfalls, now only has one time counter, so perhaps we can get something done that way. Upkeep, we're going to go ahead and ice the Steam Vents one more time, draw a card here, and now let's see. It's really tricky because it feels like both players are sort of stumbling here.
Yeah, it looks like expressive iteration using the Springleaf Gem there for Connor. Nice play to sort of, say, hey, there isn't much pressure from me. I have my Underworld Breach in hand. I have most of the combo. I'm really just missing Grinding Station and mana. Let's take this time to develop our mana and just, be okay with it.
Yeah, and as a just a reminder explanation, Urza Saga that created the construct did go ahead and fetch Springleaf Drum, which is a nice way to convert that into permanent mana. Rhinos are going to come into play now here for Benji, and looks like we found the land. Finally, maybe we have the ability to do something. Or do you think Benji's not supposed to play a Cascade spell this turn?
It looks like Benji might have Violent Outburst, so he gets to hold up and then have the ability to maybe hard cast something like Force Negation if he needed to, or anything along those lines, maybe another Stomp, Mystical Dispute type situation. With the Rhinos coming off the suspend here, there's a lot less pressure on Benji to actually get, Rhinos in play off a Cascader. If, we had maybe another turn or two, the suspend happening, we might be more incentivized to tap out and play something like Shardless Agent, as we're going to see Connor Prismatic ending half a Rhino down.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier about, just how Rhinos is that sort of aggressive tempo style strategy. So I'm actually really interested that Benji chose to sort of lean into that. But there it is. Good call on the Violent Outburst, Mason.
Yeah, as Benji now has to sit here and we have to watch this. It's my least favorite part of Cascade. It's the strictly better region of Moto. Yeah, you have to sit there and flip all the cards.
It's so much fun, though.
You shuffle the cards, the Spell Pierce comes down. That's a lot of fun on a Rhino.
All right, so that is actually gonna. Oh, okay, that's because there's a Spell Pierce. But I was like, well, that's a dark timeline you're talking about. But it's the one that we live in right now. So Spell Pierce going to counter here the second Crashing Footfalls, which means honestly, Connor's position doesn't look too bad. We're still able to spend some time developing. Unholy Heat going to take care of the other Rhino.
And I like this tap out from Connor right now to Unholy Heat the Rhino. If your Spell Pierce resolved, that probably means there's no Force Negation, so we might as well fight over this Rhino.
Okay. Shardless Agent going to come into play, and there it is. See, look at that top card, Mason. Sometimes all you have to do is speak your mind honestly, and you get rewarded for it. I love it.
Yeah,
we call it complaint equity.
Complaint. That's right. Legacy players go to, as we do see a fetch here with the Unholy Heat.
Okay, so Unholy Heat going to take care of one of these other Rhinos. Now, honestly, Is this a good exchange here for Connor? Because I feel like when I've watched some Rhino players play, they really do like it when you engage in those 2-for-1 exchanges or 1-for-2 exchanges. Like we just use 2 unholy heats and a prismatic ending to get rid of 1.5 cards from Benji's side. That seems like a losing recipe.
It is definitely a losing recipe. For Connor, though, we have cards like Underworld Breach and the One Ring in your deck. You can make these sort of trades in order to buy time to recoup with cards. And you see Connor has both the One Ring and Underworld Breach in hand. He's very close just to finding Grinding Station and taking over this game. So, Connor doesn't want to be making these trades with the Rhinos if he didn't have to. But with a card like the One Ring and Breach, he's going to undo that sort of loss of card advantage over the next couple turns here.
All right. Well, Team Solomon looks to have also won the first game in Pioneer. Vinnie Fino on the Archfiend deck against Theo Jung on Rakdos Sacrifice. But back to the modern match here. Looks like the One Ring has now entered play. It has given the Shroud of Protection and now has also tapped to draw a card. So, what does the Rhinos deck do about this? You mentioned a sweet interaction earlier with Stomp. Is there anything else?
Besides Stomp, there's not much. This is a good turn for Benji to sort of, get more Rhinos on the board and just want to pressure immediately. The thing about the ring, like we talked about earlier, one of our pre-shows, is sort of you get the cards first, life later. The Rhinos deck attacks for such huge chunks that we want to spend this time just getting, our last Rhinos onto the battlefield. That way we can push as much damage so Connor has the least amount of time and life to play with the cards from the ring.
All right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess if this turn you can't push damage through. I mean, maybe so we saw, Benji actually hold up mana in one of the prior turns. I mean, that was obviously explained by the violent outburst, but potentially Benji could have other cards here. What are some other cards that you would want from Benji's side to interact with the breach deck to just make sure that you're not dying, us with the single underworld breach on the stack?
Yeah, the number one is Force of Negation. That's going to be both a free spell and a hard spell counter. Benji might have a couple Mystical Disputes in his deck. That was a card that, once again, was really popular before the addition of the ring. We've seen some people like Benji have at least a couple Bone Crusher Giants. So that's a way to also counter Underworld Breach or Grinding Station. Connor does have Grinding Station in hand and Underworld Breach. So he has the full combo since Mox Amber is in the graveyard with Emery. It's just a matter of getting it onto the battlefield. So we have to see how Connor wants to navigate this turn. He is going to start with the Breach before drawing any cards off the ring.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to ask you one more question. What about a card like Brazen Borrower?
That card can matter. So we might see a thing where, Connor goes and uses some mana and taps out, and then we Brazen Borrower to bounce into a Breach.
Oh, snap.
Mystical Dispute. I really like this from Benji here. Basically saying, hey, if you want to do this, you're going to lose a lot. Although I think Connor's actually one Mox Amber in the graveyard away from playing through it, because we could have escaped Amber and then used our Springleaf Stone to cast Amber, and then the Amber's online, and we'd just be one mana away. Connor maybe, need to get these cards first here off the ring and see what he could have done, but he's going to draw now and sort of reassess his options.
Okay, I definitely see the Grinding Station in the hand here for Connor. I wonder if there was another copy of Underworld Breach picked up, but
it looks like there was.
Okay, this is really tense now because we're just sort of, it's interesting. Like the Mystical Dispute, do you think that signals that there's no copies of Force of Negation there?
I think that you might make that read, although I kind of like the idea of like, hey, if you pay with the Mystical Dispute, it's going to be really hard to go for it, and I can Force Negation down if you have the second Amber in hand, and I kind of get more out of it. So Connor might be able to assume that there's a chance there's no Force Negation, but I don't think there's any clear signal.
Then that was a really cutting play, and the more I think about it, the more I just love that Mystical Dispute here. I mean, Benji also he kind of like instantly played it, so I think he knew, like he's been thinking like throughout this entire time, like, okay, Breach comes down this turn, here's how I'm going to handle it, and like you mentioned, it's pretty close, right? Like we're at the stage of the match where like one turn later, one land drop later, and that Mystical Dispute wouldn't have done anything. So I think the timing is actually also just really incredible.
100%. It's like Benji is tanking. This might be a sign, by the way, that Benji does have a card like Force Negation, because if he's having to think about how to use his mana, he might be thinking like, oh, I have Force or another Mystical Dispute. There's something that's making Benji not want to put a bunch of Rhinos on the battlefield. And or cast that Bone Crusher Giant, because we know there's a Bone Crusher that we could cast no matter what.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? Which is like just the idea of, okay, so we're suspending another Footfalls here. Okay, so that means there's one more left somewhere in the deck, and just passing the turn here. So mana is open. Now, let me ask you a question here. If you're on Connor's side, you have the Underworld Breach in your hand potentially that you drew off of the One Ring. I mean, would you have rather seen Rhinos in play or open mana in play? I feel like it's the mana is way scarier, right?
The mana is a little scarier, but Connor is actually so far ahead on board and on cards that he can actually make these one-for-one trades some more. Before we talked about Benji is pretty happy to have, this one card answer the one Rhino. That dynamic is now shifting, and now Benji has to figure out, can I beat this breach? Connor also has the second breach in hand, so Benji's going to have double answer.
Okay. All right. And interestingly enough, again, Connor in not activating the ring before the Underworld Breach, which to me signifies maybe we don't need the cards. To me signifies maybe we're conscious of the life total. What is the reason to not? What is the reason that you could get punished by the ring's temptations?
I mean, that is the main one. Is your opponent has some answer, you can't execute the combo. I do think that given the sort of board state and sort of that's the last crushing footfalls, so we know there's no more, flashing Rhinos, that I probably would have liked to see Connor draw his cards first just to sort of get a better idea on what he can and can't fight over. We saw last game he didn't even respond to Mystical, as Mystical Speed is going to hit the Emery, but it just doesn't matter with the Underworld Breach in play. Emery's going to actually mill the cards back, and we have the station. So the game is over if we cannot exile one of the zeros here. And between having Bobble and Mox Amber in play, which is hiding underneath the land there for Connor actually just has the win now. So what we're going to see is Connor can float a mana with the Amber eventually. That will allow him to cast. It depends on what Connor's win condition is. I can check real quick. I think he is playing Thassa's Oracle. Yeah, he has one. So he'll eventually make some blue mana with the Amber, replay it, mill his whole deck, and then cast Thassa's Oracle, win the game. So you're seeing it here. He's sort of floating a blue, milling 3 cards, grinding station trigger, untap, and then going to repeat that process over and over and over again, and then cast Thassa's Oracle. Yeah, and Benji's picking up his cards. Connor says, I have the Oracle, and Benji's just like, yeah, show me.
Yep. All right. And the St. Louis champions take game number 1 here in the modern side. Now, as players are going to shuffle up in sideboard, we're going to dive right into Legacy here to see some more nonstop action here at the Team Trios event in St. Louis. We have Cephalid breakfast at the hands of Chad Harney, winning game 1 against David Delgado on Doomsday. I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Yeah, I'm a little curious what your thoughts here are on the Cephalid Breakfast deck, as we are going to see a Polluted Delta in the passing of the turn here from David. This is a deck that's been popping up a lot. What is the big draw of Cephalid Breakfast these days?
Yeah, so Cephalid Breakfast is like a 1-2 punch kind of combo deck. You leverage the card, I think it's Cephalid Illusion or Cephalid something Priest. It's basically combining that with Nomad's Encore or Shuko. And essentially what you do is a Cephalid Illusionist. Essentially, you just keep targeting your Illusionist over and over and over again. Now, what happens when you target this card? Cephalid Illusionist actually says when it is targeted, you just mill the top 3 cards of your deck. Like you can... Okay, this is a ponder. Never mind. And eventually, you put your whole deck into your graveyard. That includes Narcomoeba, that includes Thassa's Oracle, and that includes Dread Return. So then you buy back Dread Return and buy back Thassa's Oracle with Dread Return, and you win the game there. The crazy part about this is that you could win as fast as turn 2 if you just go like turn 1 Nomads or like Aether Vial or something like that. Although Aether Vial kind of phasing out, and then turn 2 Illusionist. Bam, that's it. You play cards like Daze and Force of Will and Orm's Chant to protect your combo, and you just win.
Yep. As we're going to see that ponder there from Chad's going to think through it. And a pass of the turn to David Delgado, who's down a game here on the Doomsday deck. I know a lot of Doomsday players have been saying that Cephalid Breakfast might be like the better version of their deck. Do you think there's anything to that, or is that just, maybe some Doomsday players not getting as many new toys and feeling like their deck's falling behind?
Yeah, I mean, historically, Doomsday has been a very, very powerful deck, especially with the printing of Thassa's Oracle. The downside, though, is a single 1-mana Insectile Aberration. Or like Lightning Bolt is really tricky when your key card forces you to slash your life total in half, aka Doomsday. So part of resolving Doomsday is you lose half your life total, write it down. And that makes a very aggressive strategy is kind of a problem sometimes, especially when they're backed up by Daze and Forcible. Now, the reason Cephalid Breakfast is, kind of like almost an upgraded version is because not only do you have access to a really fast combo with the 1-2 punch I talked about, you also get access to cards like Swords to Plowshares, a Prismatic Ending, all these white-based removal spells, and that really helps you in the tempo aggressive matchups.
Nice. So we're going to see a grief here. The hand is Orm Chance, Force of Will, Shuko, Brainstorm, Urza Saga, Island, and Flooded Strand. Any idea on what we might be griefing?
This is a delicate balance because, again, this is the struggle here. From the Doomsday side, you're kind of worried about comboing off yourself, but then not getting comboed off here. So I think the real answer is I don't have an answer for you what the correct take is. It really just does depend on the texture of Delgado's hand here. And so that means we could see something like the Brainstorm being taken away to sort of disrupt the hand. If we're trying to go a little bit longer, we could see the Force of Will be taken away here. That might signal that that Delgado has access to a Doomsday that we want to play soon. I don't think we care too much about the Orum's chant here. And then the Shuko obviously is just kind of a mulligan. One of the downsides to playing the breakfast deck is like sometimes you draw the cards that are combo only, and Shuko is one of them. So we'll see what Delgado decides on.
Yeah, see him think through the turn. Delgado also does have days in hand, so that's going to move things a little bit as Orm Chant was the take.
All right, so with Orum's Chant being taken here from the outside looking in, I would say that is a card that causes problems for us that we don't have answers to, which means we probably don't have a fast combo of ourselves. We're trying to play a bit more defensively here from the Doomsday side.
Yep. As we do see a fetch here.
Now it's also funny too. You mentioned that there was a copy of Days in the hand here. It's also possible that the Force of Will just doesn't matter, and that's why we're not taking it. And that our hand is so strong that we're just thinking, how do I lose on the next turn? And Orum's Chant could be like a part of that recipe.
Yeah, maybe you cast in sort of the middle of the combo. You can't go anywhere. As Dark Ritual is being played right now, it looks like we are going to fire off Doomsday.
All right, Dark Ritual into Doomsday. Storm count is what, 3?
Yeah. And we know from Chad's side, Chad has Force of Will. Chad also knows that David knows this. And so Chad's going to figure out, do I want to force here, see if David has some sort of protection spell, or do I want to force over some of the later combo turn?
Yeah, and so just as a recap of high level what this Doomsday deck is, I'll just introduce people who are new to the format. Doomsday is a single card. It says it's black, 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 and it basically says search your entire library for 5 cards. You can recreate a mini deck of those 5 cards, and then you lose your life. You lose half your life rounded. Oh, I guess rounded up. Yeah. So what that means is we're going to look for a card, like a 5-card pile that has Thassa's Oracle and a way to draw into the Thassa's Oracle, and then a way to usually get the Thassa's Oracle to be uncounterable, i.e. Cavern of Souls. So we're going to see here now whether we have all the tools and recipes to do that. There are many, many ways you can do this. For example, you have Edge of Autumn, Lion's Eye Diamond, and cards like Deep Analysis that used to be in the deck. You have access to Predict as a potential option. We'll see what pile David Delgado is going to cook up here. But looking at the list right now, I do see the Cavern of Souls. I see 1 copy of Consider.
I saw a Street Wraith.
Okay, and you saw a Street Wraith as well. So at this point, I'm going to assume that David's got this on lock. And one thing that's kind of important to notice as well is that the Doomsday decks in a lot of scenarios will make what we call pass the turn piles, where we may not necessarily be able to win the turn we resolve the Doomsday, but if we get to untap, we'll just cause all sorts of mayhem. And that might also be something that David is looking forward to as well. So it does look like we have our modern players shuffling up. So we'll probably return there, and then we'll keep an eye on the pips there at the bottom of the screen here to see how the Doomsday deck is actually going to finish here. As looks like Benji on the play here has a Triome and a Scalding Tarn on the other side.
Yeah, by the way, Vinnie has just won the Pioneer seat with Archfiend combo against Theo on Rakdos Sacrifice. So the team of Benjamin and David is up 1-0 right now. But Connor and Chad are also up the games right now. So there's, only one of these players need to convert, but they do need to convert.
Okay, yeah. Let's see here. So we're going to play Gemstone Caverns into play. Untapped. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Now, we didn't talk about this, but we should dive right into it. Sideboarding in this matchup. I see a couple copies of Endurance from the Rhinos side. How do you feel about that card in this matchup?
It's pretty good. It basically can turn off the breach turn while also being a flash threat that just sort of, allows you to play a normal beatdown game plan, right? You want to put those Rhinos into play, but then sometimes you end up pulling your mana up for Mystical Disputes and Force Negations, and then, they sort of pass the turn or play something you don't want to counter. And then Endurance is a great way to sort of do that. Also just a great way to 0 mana sort of counter a Underworld Breach, as we do see a Forest in the past.
Oh wow. Okay. This is a little bit terrifying, right? I mean, this is generally how the matchup I'm sure it goes, where you just put a bunch of lands into play here. Mishra's Bauble going to come into play here now from Connor's side. And we're just slamming Emery here down on turn 3. Okay.
Yeah, and we do see Benji taking a moment to think about it. Probably has a card like Violent Outburst in hand, but might also just have, Stomp or Mystical Dispute and thinking how I want to do this. We mill 3 Ursa Sagas and a Springleaf Drum. So Connor does hit, but only technically speaking, as we do see Violent Outburst Cascade happen.
Okay.
And Connor does have a Spell Pierce in hand, but Benji might have a Force of Negation. It might have been. Okay. Sometimes players do bring in Force as a way to break up, the Grinding Station and the Breach.
Yeah, interesting. That could be pretty powerful, just having a bunch of cards in your hand that you can cast free, allowing you to tap out here. But fetching up the Hallowed Fountain, Spell Piercing, the Crashing Footfalls, and it looks like, did we just point to it? I think one of the teammates may have come in and pointed to a card, which to me signals that maybe there's a fight to be had here. Benji, are you going to let this Spell Pierce have its way again with the Crashing Footfalls? The answer is no. Force of Negation on the stack says, I get my Rhinos, aggro, tempo. That's the name of the game.
Yep. And this is actually really big, that Force Negation Exile. Sometimes with this Grinding Station deck, you'll get Breach into play, and they'll try to fight over a different piece. And now you have Spell Pierce in your graveyard. So it being exiled actually might come up later in the game as well, along with just 8 power crashing under Connor here. This means Connor is going to be behind the 8 ball.
All right. Mishra's Bauble going to peek at the card that Benji's drawing for turn, draw a card on the upkeep. And now I got to ask you, seems like Benji's in the driver's seat. What are we doing? What's the next few turns going to look like?
We're going to play a game very similar to something, we're going to play a Delver type game. We're just going to try and protect these Rhinos and go the distance. That's the whole game plan. Protecting
the Rhinos. That's interesting. So that means that the Rhinos could probably be killed somehow. We did see Unholy Heats and Prismatic Endings. Do those survive the sideboarding?
Sometimes in small numbers they do. Things like Engineered Explosives are typically played in pretty high numbers out of this Breach deck. With Emery, EE is a really powerful sort of engine to answer a lot of recursive problems, and EE just answers a lot of problematic hate cards that can come your way, like Rest in Peace, something like that as well. So we might see Connor have that, as we do actually see EE tap in the hand. Yeah, and we might even see Connor just pop the EE and then replay it with the Emery for future Rhinos. So it depends on how he wants to play this turnout.
Yeah, that is a really, really, really. I mean, I know a thing or two about stopping aggression, and having a sweeper here for 0 mana is probably the best way. You can see, is that Emery coming into the red? Oh no, never. Okay, I freaked out for a moment. Targeting the Mishra's Bauble.
What are strong cards, buddy? Nothing to freak out right now. We do have Manamo in play that can untap our Emery later and get multiple Bauble activations. It seems a little far fetched, but actually very strong with the One Ring. Much more of a real play than might appear at first glance.
I have been very impressed with that card actually in my testing. Being able to jump from no cards in hand and like a magic trick, suddenly you have like 5 on your draw step or something is an incredible feeling. But now I think seeing sort of how this game is playing out, where does the advantage bar lay? Who is ahead? Who is behind? What needs to happen to get back to parity?
So we need to answer this Emery. Emery plus Engineered Explosives is going to be a huge problem because all of the threats are going to be, these Rhinos. There are some Furies in the deck, and we saw Endurance, and we have Bone Crusher Giant. So we have some things, but the Rhinos are our best bet. So we need to find a way to kill Emery. That way the EE can stop coming down. Another huge moment there from Force Negation. If it had caught the EE, would have exiled it. So that's another way now where maybe we get a future Force Negation to save our Rhinos. And we do actually have it in hand. It looks like it was the draw for turn. So now Benji's going to need to find some way to answer.
Yeah, well, it seems like we need to go back to step 1, which is pressure. So judging from the way you're speaking, it sounds like Benji's actually on the back foot here, right? It sounds like
Yeah, the ball's certainly. Oh, and Chad Harney actually ends up beating the Doomsday pile. Chad must have drawn some way to mess up that pile over there, and or just comboed himself. One of the good things about Cephalid Breathfish you're talking about on Rog is how quickly it can combo. So maybe David Delgado took a little bit more of a safer approach, and Chad just went 1-2 Buckaroo combo you.
Yeah, interesting too, because I remember the orange chat and things like that. So actually now the stakes suddenly just amped up by a lot because the winner of this match is going to give their team that coveted point. And honestly, with the records that we're at, it's do or die, right? So we're going to see here whether or not the St. Louis champions can run it back. Force of Negation going to take care of Teferi, so that means Engineered Explosives can come back. Should Connor choose?
Yeah, and you see Connor's talking to his teammates about, hey, do I double bobble this turn or do I Emery bobble? No, sorry, do I EE or double bobble? And it looks like we're going to start with the EE. And then I like this. You want to make sure you get the one you want the most first. That way, if there's something like a stomp or something that maybe they waited on to try and beat a spell pierce from the force negation, you actually can still get it. As Bob was going to take a look at Benji top card. Is a crashing footfalls. You love to see that if you're Connor.
All right, untap, upkeep, draw. And I wonder at this point how many cards in Benji's hand are actually known to Connor, because there have been so many Mishra's Bauble activations. And honestly, like, this feels like one of the real reasons to play the Breach deck, right? Is because even if you don't have the Breach combo, you are one of the dirtiest just Mishra's Bauble looping decks that, I don't know, I've seen in all of Modern.
Yeah, this is a big part of it. Is you have this combo game plan, which is really strong. You have the Urza Saga Ragavan game plan, which is really good at sort of putting pressure on people. And then you have sort of the Ring and Emery now to play normal fair games, where you just sort of like, we're sort of playing like a pseudo control deck right now, right? We just have sort of our Wrath, we keep playing it, and we just draw a couple extra cards with Bobble, and we work towards winning eventually.
All right, 2 mana here. Dashed Ragavan coming into play. And now I think we're going to see Connor slowly convert this massive advantage that he's accumulated over the past few turns. Is that a Mystical Dispute going into exile?
It is. And weirdly kind of relevant at times. Like if Benji tried to do something like a Brazen Borrower, now that is going to be a problem. As we're going to see Connor towards his mana a little bit. And it looks like he's going to cast Underworld Breach.
This is interesting. Okay. A post-combat Underworld Breach. And let me ask you this. Why would we sequence it this way? Why do we have this Ragavan in play? Why didn't we just play the Breach?
We just put our land in the graveyard on accident. Can we stop the players? We cannot put our Manamo accidentally in the graveyard.
Good catch.
Production, I'm sure will take care of. There we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. And that's such an easy mistake to have happen too. I assume that's because we maybe had combo in hand. Looks like we do have grinding station, so you can start by just milling Bobble and then eventually find the Amber and start making the mana. So as long as Amber isn't like the last couple cards in your deck, you're fine. And with 3 of them, it's so unlikely. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing Connor sort of just run it, and that sort of forces Benji's hand. If Benji has something like Crashing Footfalls or anything like that, and he wanted to do it, he just can't really go for it. And then Connor does get a Bobble out of the exchange no matter what. It looks like Connor is going to shock, and that's going to mean we could see 3 Bobbles go this turn. And Connor, doesn't even need the ring to draw a bunch of cards. We just have Emery Manamo going.
Yeah, the DIY mom says we have the ring at home kind of deal, right?
Yeah, 100%. As a land on top of the deck there for Benji, and Connor has Force Negation in hand. He is looking to be in a really premium position here.
Okay. All right. So we do see the Crashing Footfalls in exile with 4 time counters, but I suspect that the game's not even going to go that long. Honestly, this Breach deck has looked super sick. And on the resume, it already exists there. So is this like an Aether Spellbomb or something? Like an Aether Spellbomb in play, sure.
Yeah, and this Aether Spellbomb is actually a really good way to protect your Emery from something like a Fury. That's one of the cards that could end up mattering. Fury or Bone Crusher Giant. Now, if we try to stomp this Emery, well, we're just going to bounce it to our hand and actually counter the Bone Crusher Giant. It'll go to the graveyard. Try to Fury, well, you're going to get it in play, but we're going to have to save our Emery and keep this card advantage engine going.
And keeping in mind at the bottom of your screen here, you could see the engineered explosive still in play. You could see that there is a treasure token here generated by the Ragavan in play as well. Wooded Foothills is the reveal here for the Mishra's Bauble. That's good news for Connor, bad news for Benji. And I think we're going to see the handshakes pretty soon here, as it just looks like with a full grip, this game is just utterly dominated here by the Breach side of things.
100%, as we do see a dash Ragavan once again. And this is, or it looks like, sorry, hard casting, my mistake there. And I think we just have so much protection up from Connor that instead of dashing a return, we're just taking a turn off to develop and double check here, as we are dangerously close to sort of finding our combo and getting to go. And withdrawing 2 to 3 cards a turn thanks to Manamo and Emery, it's going to be really hard for Benji to overpower, even if we start, demonic tutoring all our draw steps. If we let Benji pick his draw for turn,
ooh, I love it.
To be that to take over.
I love when we're in that territory of like, okay, can I win the demonic tutor challenge? And that is great. I love that. Yeah, I aspire generally to. So actually, I think I was actually thinking about this yesterday. There's whenever I have more counters than my opponent actually has cards in hand, that's when I know I can just relax and like enter that garbage time where I'm like literally just like my eyes are closed and I'm not even realizing what buttons I'm clicking. And you can see here Benji sort of just I guess we're fetching here potentially, just to optimize. future draw steps here, but at this point, I think it's pretty cool to say that Connor has yeah, it's just it's over.
Yeah, we're maybe get a chance to talk to these players after the round is over. We'll of course ask them for an interview. Last time we didn't have much time between the rounds there, so we didn't get to talk to Sam Black and friends. But we'll see if we can get them to hop in the mic. Whoever wins this, Benji, like I said, probably is going to need a lot to go right. But if we do, I'd love to talk to Benji after that happens. So we'll see what happens here.
I'm pretty sure even if Connor drew 8 lands in a row, that he'd still be in a winning position, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like so this is just like generally what happens with this sort of Rhino style deck is, so you have these really explosive early game setups that you can use to sort of disrupt opponents. You put 8 points of power into play, and then you have whatever. But then after that, like you sort of peter out. Does that sound correct?
That's about right. Yeah, I actually, small misstep from Connor here. I think he was supposed to bobble first and sort of just see if the card was worth taking with Ragavan. In this situation, it was just a land, and Connor would be very happy just to actually not hit for 2 damage because Connor's going to win with a combo. He doesn't need to actually do damage. Now, Benji's going to draw Force of Vigor. Obviously, with Emery in play, not the end of the world, but does create some problems here. So, if you're Connor's side, it's really hard to lose. Like, you see him even be kind of like with him. It's like, yeah, I think I messed up, but I got 7 cards, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I kind of want to like rewind and sort of just like look at how this game progressed and sort of try to understand what was the critical moment where Connor actually got really, really far ahead. Do you have any thoughts in mind?
The EE on the Rhinos. That's when we were able to just wipe the board and then put the EE immediately back into play so that all future Rhinos would be at least covered, or there had to be some extra resource used on the engineered explosives. And then when we just started, Embry not being answered, if Benji had drawn, a Stomp or a Fire Ice 3-4 turns ago, we might be having a totally different game because Connor would be down half the resources. If Connor could win, he would go for it. He's not just going to sit here and draw a card because he knows his life total is under pressure, and that is a way he could weirdly lose the game. So He's sculpting right now because he has that ability to, but he's also trying to find the answers. And we've seen Connor, go for the breach in a spot where it wasn't even 100% to win, as we do find the breach here. Now, we know Force of Vigor is in hand, so we can blow up that breach after 1 card is cast. But Connor's going to go for something like a second breach here. And he has Spell Pierce up. I don't know if he has enough cards in Graveyard to actually fight over the Force of Vigor by just cast Spell Pierce, cast Spell Pierce off the escape, but we'll have to see.
Okay, so this is actually really interesting, bringing back a second Underworld breach here. I mean, in a world of Force of Vigor, I'm sure that game that like is not, it's not a winning line because you could just pop, get rid of both of the breaches. But what are we playing around otherwise by getting a second Underworld breach here? What's the reason to do this?
We're getting to keep the rest of our pieces, right? So, for example, that engineered explosives gets to stay on the board because now if you want to stop my breach turn, you have to hit both breaches. You can't hit breach and grinding station. And when you're low on card, like there's probably only 3 to 4 breaches in the deck. Sometimes you might even see players trim post 4 because they don't need as much of it to actually win. Making them have to fight over both breaches means our next breach is for sure probably going to win the game just because you're up so many pieces here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also
grinding station on the box.
Oh, okay, here it is. So Force of Vigor is going to now go on the stack. Most likely targeting double Underworld breach, but we'll see what happens here. And then, okay, it doesn't even matter because we're just going to go ahead and counter that immediately here using the floating mana from the Mox Amber. And that's going to move into the exile. I guess the other thing, too, is we did see Beseiju earlier. So being able to play around another copy of that, or like Odawara or Brazen Bar that we talked about earlier, those are all cards that could technically fizzle the combo with a single breach. So props to Connor for just being diligent.
Yeah, and the reason Connor also knows all of Benji's hand except for 2 cards. As we do see the handshakes are across the table there. Yeah. Congratulations.
A flurry of handshakes. Yeah.
Whoa. What a wild one, too.
That was pretty exciting. So as a heads up now, we will have an interview here with Connor just to sort of get an understanding of what are some of the thoughts that are going on in his head. I actually, I asked you that question about what was the critical moment, and I kind of feel like the big ticket moment was also the Spell Pierce in game 2 on the violent outburst that was on the end step. We saw that Benji immediately followed up with the Force of Negation, sort of with that realization, like, hey, I need to have pressure on the board. This matchup is not going to go well for me if it goes long. And then immediately with the punish there with the engineered explosive. So I think it's like a fusion of all the cards together that really kind of is what it was. But that was just a dominating performance from the Jeskai Breach side of things.
Yeah, and we saw in game 1 too where the ring was really helpful as well, and we see sort of the upgrades to this breach deck, right? It has breach and ring and expressive and breach and stuff and emery, right? There's so much card advantage. It's really hard to run them out, and you can make those at disadvantageous trades of like I'm going to unholy prismatic ending and still sort of go the distance. So really showing how strong this deck has been. I do believe Connor is ready for the interview, so let's hop on down there and say hello, Gak, to him.
I'm gonna remember
Connor,
that
hello,
one.
Gak.
Hello, Gag Connor. What up? All right, I'm not catching your audio real quick.
Yeah, I'm not getting
but
Connor's audio.
I'm going to ask you a real quick question first as we get that figured out. So first of all, congratulations on the win here. You got paired up against Temur Rhinos, and I wanted to ask you basically is like, how do you feel about that matchup playing against Temur Rhinos with Jeskai Breach? It seems kind of tense.
Yeah, unfortunately, we still don't seem to have audio from Connor's mic there. Might be a situation with what's going on there.
So what we can actually do right now is we could just cut back to the booth here. We'll stick around. We'll get Connor audio fixed up real quick, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, I'm also wondering. So the other matchups that we also saw, we saw Cephalid Breakfast against Doomsday, which was kind of like a nice little like reverse Uno there. As we left that match, Doomsday was finished resolving on the stack, and we were like, okay, we're probably gonna go to game 3. You just have to untap, play your Thassa's Oracle off of Cavern of Souls. But then we saw the Pip finish up there. So I think what we'll actually do is maybe ask Connor, or maybe ask Connor to ask one of his teammates actually how that game sort of wrapped up, because I would love to see the resolution of that too.
Yeah, my guess is I think probably what happened is the Doomsday player took a slower, more conservative approach. I think just honestly, the Cephalid combo must have happened on turn 2 because we had, I believe, Shuko is the name of the card in hand. So we probably played Shuko, didn't get days fought over it, right? Then we probably just like had a setup turn. Like you mentioned, sometimes you Doomsday was winning on the following turn, right? Just wanted to play through everything. And then I imagine that's the only way that makes sense to me, unless there's maybe Thought Scour and Chad's deck and Thought Scoured, boom, milled over the Thassa's Oracle, which would have been super cool. And I wish we would have saw that if that was the case.
Yeah, interesting for sure. Looking at the deck list as well, I don't see anything particularly crazy that does sort of shout out to me. I see Orm's Chants and things like that, but whatever it is, we'll get that story caught up here, and we'll keep the chat also in tune for when Connor is ready and back. And then I think the last matchup that we actually didn't get to talk about was the Rakdos Sacrifice against Archfiend Alteration matchup. Now that's a pretty interesting one. We saw Theo, who is a fantastic player, get pretty easily handled by Vinnie Fino, who is, again, another fantastic player as well. So this Archfiend Alteration deck, I've heard whisperings and rumors of it. I mean, at this point, I guess it is sort of an established archetype. What is that deck trying to do again?
Yeah, so it's trying to set up Archfiend of Dross, which is the 6/6 that has these 4 kind of oil counters on it, and every turn it loses a counter. And then when it runs out of counters, then you lose the game. And what you do is you play a card called Metamorphic Alteration, which turns any creature on the battlefield into another one. So what you do is you turn their creature into an Archfiend of Dross, then the Archfiend of Dross has no counters, and you lose the game. It looks like, unfortunately, there's going to be no interview. So we're going to go to the best of the NRG series moment here. It looks like we're having some technical issues. We'll hopefully fix that in the future. Congratulations once again to Connor's team. And Honorog and I will see you back here in round number 3 in just a few minutes.